Hello class, we're going to be talking about perfect squares and square roots. But before we start, I want us to take a minute and let's think about a few things. What makes a square special, and how would you describe the main differences between a square and a rectangle? I'd like you to pause the video and kind of think those over for a second. So we should remember that a square is a four-sided shape where all of these sides are the same length. So that makes it different from a square because a square is a four-sided shape, but all the sides don't have to be the same length. We also remember that there's right angles in both of these, but the main difference and the main thing we want to focus on is that a square has all sides that are the same length. So when we're talking about perfect squares and square roots, the main idea here is that perfect squares are formed when we multiply a number by itself. And we have these little diagrams here. So again, we have that idea of a square because we can see that these shapes make up squares. I would say that 1 squared equals 1 times 1, which is 1. So 1 is a perfect square. When I make my square a little bigger, I have 2's on both sides. So 2 times 2, or 2 squared, equals 4. So 4 is a perfect square. I could make a square with 3 on all sides, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So to find the total number of squares it would need to take up the area, I've got 3 squared, or 3 times 3, which is 9. Same thing with 4. If there's 4's on both sides, 4 squared, or 4 times 4, equals 16. And then lastly, I've got this 5-sided square, or not 5-sided square, 5 on all sides of the square. So 5 squared, or 5 times 5, is 25. So that's a perfect square. The opposite of squaring a number is finding the square root. It is indicated by this square root symbol. So remember, it's the opposite of squaring a number. So let's try it out. If I already know that 1 is a perfect square, and I already know that to find the opposite I would take the square root, well, I have to think, what number do I multiply by itself to get the number on the inside? Well, to get 1 on the inside, the opposite of finding the perfect square, which is the square root, I would do 1 times 1. So the square root of 1 is 1. What number times itself gets me 4? Well, I know from up top, 2 times 2 is 4. Same thing with 9. How do I get 9? What do I multiply by itself to get 9? Well, that's 3. How do I get 16? What times what gives me 16? 4 times 4 is 16. And you can notice a pattern. If my perfect square is 1, to find the square root of that, I'm just going to go backwards. So I know the square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 4 is 2, square root of 9 is 3, square root of 16 is 4. And lastly, we can kind of complete the pattern. I know if a square is made up of 5's on both sides, I get the area, which is 25. And then if I take the square root of 25, I'm left with 5. So what I would like us to do before the next class is I want us to fill out this chart. We need to know the square root of 1 all the way up to the square root of 400. So it's your job to kind of figure out, well, what times what gets me 36? What number times itself gets me 49? Same thing with here. What number times itself gets me 64?